So I just recorded this entire deep dive and I didn't even turn the mic on. So I guess here's round two. Today we're actually going to be talking about Melmetal. So Melmetal was a Pokemon back in the Boulder League that a lot of people used to take out one of the top contenders, which was Skarmory. The fact that he was a one-trick pony really made me dislike Melmetal in that cup. He's back again in the Kingdom Cup having the pure steel typing. He's got kind of an interesting set of moves here, and I think he actually may be quite more useful than he was in the Boulder Cup, for me at least. So let's actually get into that. So Melmetal is a pure steel type Pokemon at level 40 with 15 IVs across the board. You can max out at 35.99. So that's pretty high, and that means that we're not going to get a full potential Pokemon out of Melmetal. I did run the number, it's like 22 or 23% potential. Pretty low, but that don't even pay attention to that. We can achieve a 14.99 at level 17 if we have a 1 on attack, 15 defense, and 14 stamina. So I've done some lighting, and it's like all up on the board. So I'll figure that out. So according to my spreadsheets, my numbers, and all the formulas that I have, Melmetal should end up ranking 30th in bulk and 29th in stat products, so that's actually pretty good. The fact that he's on the top side of the cup is definitely somewhere to be. Some of the Pokemon that we looked at so far have ended up being on the bottom end, and it's better that Melmetal's on the top than the bottom. Let's just say that. Moving on to our moves here, we do have all of our moves that have stab potential highlighted in green here to match our steel typing. Unfortunately, we only have one. And it's not a fast move, it's definitely a charge move. So Thundershock is our only fast move here, which is an amazing fast move if I do say so myself. 4.5 energy per turn and a 1.5 damage per turn is quite huge. The energy is insane, the damage is measly, but we definitely want that energy more than we want the damage here. Moving on to our charge moves, we do have Flash Cannon costing 65 for 110 damage with a 1.69 damage per energy ratio. Thunderbolt costing 55, doing 90 damage at a 1.64 ratio. Hyper Beam costing 80 for 150 damage with a 1.88 ratio. And Rock Slide coming in at the bottom with 45 energy, 80 damage with a 1.78 ratio there. So in all of my testing, I definitely feel like Rock Slide and Flash Cannon are the two charge moves to go with. But there's a caveat. You don't necessarily need Flash Cannon. In all of the testing that I've done, Rock Slide is like 1000% preferred in all of the matchups for this Kingdom Cup. So take that for what you will. You don't necessarily need Flash Cannon, but if you plan on using Melmetal in other cups, kind of like you did in the Boulder Cup, or if you already have one from the Boulder Cup that you've already invested in, Flash Cannon definitely seems to be the preferred move there. Moving on to our shield situation, please keep in mind Thundershock, Flash Cannon, and Rock Slide were used for all of the simulations used in this scenario. So we actually end up with 0 shields versus 0 shields. We have 64.1% of the matchups there, which is pretty nice. I mean, it's not the best we've seen, but it's pretty good. 2 shields versus no shields, where I have both of my shields and the opponent has 0. The reason that we run this is so that we can figure out which Pokemon just straight up annihilate us. We want to know which ones aren't even worth wasting shields on. Those Pokemon kind of have a theme. They're either ground or fighting types. So things like Alolan Dugtrio, Registeel, Steelix, we just flat out lose to those 3. Blaziken and Lucario are kind of honorable mentions there because we do end up tying against those 2. In the scenario where I have 0 shields and my opponent has 2 shields, we actually end up winning 2.6% of the matches, which is terrible. That's low. That's extremely low. But the reason that we run that number is so that we can figure out which Pokemon we just straight up hardcore counter. And that is interesting because it's only 2 Pokemon and one of them is Snover. Yeah, the other Pokemon being Articuno, which is okay, I guess. I don't really foresee a lot of people going after Articuno, but lastly here we do have a 2 shields versus 2 shields situation. So in terms of being a lead-off Pokemon, how good do we actually do here? It's not good. I'll just tell you, it's 37.2%. Moving on to our matches here, so in all of the deep dives, I end up taking our subject Pokemon and I put them up against the top bulkiest Pokemon in the league. It's been the top 11 for some reason, I just have been doing 11. Either way, we end up losing to Registeel, Probopass, Steelix, Bastiodon, Torkoal, and Forretress. So you can kind of see a interesting trend here. Basically, if it's fighting or ground type moves, we're pretty much going to just crumble. It's pretty hard to overcome those. In terms of what we win against, though, we actually win against Regice, Dugong, Altaria, Lapras, and Skarmory. And you can kind of see a theme there, too. If it's Ice type or if it's Flying type, we end up doing really good against those. Next on the list, we actually have counters. So what should we actually be focusing our attention on whenever it comes to running a Melmetal? And if you're going up against a Melmetal, what should you be focusing your attention on in that scenario? Well, in the scenario where you're going up against a Melmetal, you really want to focus ground-type Pokemon. Like Alolan Dugtrio, Flygon, and Bastiodon, they really tear through this pure Steel typing. Fighting-type Pokemon like Lucario and Monferno end up doing really well against the Steel typing here again. And lastly, Fire types like Entei, Charmeleon, and Quilava all do really well against you. So you really have to be careful about what you put Melmetal up against. But let's talk about what you should actually put him up against. Things that have a flying type to them, like Articuno, Dragonite, and Charizard, they really have a hard time getting around this Rock Slide here. Also, ice types, things like Jinx, Regice, and Alolan Sandslash, they all have a really hard time getting around this rock type move as well. And then lastly, we have fire. Yes, fire is on a positive and a negative. So the thing is, if the fire type that you're going up against can have fire type moves or fighting type moves, you're pretty much going to lose to it. In a lot of those scenarios, you just straight up end up losing. In a scenario where you have a Pokemon that does not have fire type fast moves or fighting type fast moves, like Typhlosion generally carries that Shadow Claw, Alolan Marowak ends up carrying Hex, those types are really gonna just end up losing to you. So out of those, Typhlosion, Magmortar, and Marowak, they all end up losing to you pretty hard. Now Magmortar is kind of an interesting one. It does have fire type charge moves, but it just doesn't get to really flex its stats enough to have the bulk to be put up against you. Plus, you get to this Rock Slide way fast, so you end up tearing through that Magmortar pretty quickly. Last but not least here, in all of our deep dive glory, let's actually go over some positives and some negatives for our Melmetal here. So, I think this is the first Pokemon I've ever wrote more negatives than I have positives. And I don't know what that really says about Melmetal, but I'll let you guys decide. So, first negative that we actually have is that the second move is quite costly. Now, the only silver lining to that is that in this cup, you don't necessarily need a second move, but if you plan to use one in another cup, or if you have one from another cup that already has a second move, then you're kind of, It's kind of justified. Next on the negatives is that we're actually bad against the two kings of the meta. So Lucario and Bastiodon they really are hard to beat. And Melmetal is not the greatest at beating either of them. So we pretty much auto-lose to Bastiodon in most scenarios. And Lucario, the only time that we tie against him is when we have 2 shields and he has 0. So it's actually a really hard hill to climb whenever we're going up against the 2 kings of the Kingdom Cup here. Next on our negatives is that he's just not a great lead. The problem is that with a 37.2%, he's just not hitting on a whole lot when it comes to leading. I was really hoping, being that he's quite bulky, he only has 1 type to really target, and considering that, fire type is really the only type in the cup that could really hurt us, there's just too much dual typing going on that really just ends up just sucking the life out of your Melmetal. Last on our negatives here is that we're actually pretty bad when it comes to not having shields. So, being that we only win 2.6% of our matchups if we don't have shields and the opponent has 2 shields, being that Snover is one of the only Pokemon that we can actually beat when we don't have any shields, Melmetal relies pretty heavily on some shields. Even if it's only one, it's really, really hard to win any matchups if you don't have shields. Moving on to our positives though. So our first positive is that Melmetal is actually quite easy to obtain. As long as you keep up on your mystery boxes and as long as you pine up those Meltan, you shouldn't have a big issue getting an actual Melmetal. Now, I think one of the most important positives about Melmetal here is that he actually ends up cleaning up a lot of the anti-meta. Considering that we do really good against Articuno, Magmar, Magmortar, I mean, just weird things, Jinx, Alolan Sandslash, Dragonite, you know, those type of things we end up doing really, really good against. And I think that's kind of the big thing that Melmetal is good at. He's really good at just cleaning up the anti-meta, the off-meta things that you're going to see. And that's kind of a same situation that I had with Glalie last month. The fact that Glalie didn't really, like, excel at anything, like one thing, he just does really good at cleaning up all the crap you're not used to seeing. He does have a certain, you know, matchups that are really good in his favor, like Tropius and stuff like that. But the fact that Glalie just ends up tearing through most of the meta already is kind of his big selling point. He just does really good up against things just like Melmetal does. Melmetal just does really good up against the off-meta picks that some people are going to bring to the cup. And last but not least here, we do have Rock Slide. So Rock Slide is the only reason I feel like we're even talking about Melmetal today. If he did not have Rock Slide, I don't think he would even be a good contender for the cup. I mean, all you could really use him for is maybe like going up against the water types that you'll see in the meta. Maybe doing neutral damage with Hyper Beam. Going after some of the ice types with Flash Cannon. But other than that, there's not a big place for him until you see that he has Rock Slide, which ends up meaning fire types are going to crumble to him. Ice types are going to crumble to him. The flying types are going to crumble to him. Those things really do matter when it comes to having Rock Slide, and I think that's what brings Melmetal into the discussion today. So that is actually it. That is all I have for Melmetal. This is the second time that I've recorded this deep dive. I've been going insane. Oh, it's late. Anyways, if you guys have any deep dives that you're looking forward to, please let me know down in the comments below. I'll be happy to add it to the list and tally it up. And we're basically just working on whichever ones get voted the most. So, coming up, I think I have like Lapras and there was one more. I don't know. It's late. I can't remember. Either way, thank you guys, everybody who suggests deep dives, thank you, because I've said it before, these are for you guys, but more importantly, they help me retain this information, and I feel that because of this, I'm getting better at PvP, so thank you guys, thank you everyone who actually ends up saying anything in the comments about what I'm doing, because whether you complain to me or you don't, or you correct me on something, I appreciate it because it really does help me. Thank you. So, until our next deep dive, guys, if you like to hit the like button, make sure you do that. If you don't, you can be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in those comments below. And until our next video, I will catch you then. Dear God, I hope it's recording the sound this time.